What's up, YouTube? Hey, yo, what's up? It's Greg here from Greg's Tutoring NYC. What is up, everybody? So it's election day, and I'm finally going to start the review of a cover-to-cover review of the 2023 handbook. Booyah, right? Okay. So let's jump right into it. I'm not at my normal location, so I might have to end this. Let's see how this goes. And I might piece it together into a edited stream, which I almost never do, but let's see. All right, so this is the handbook. The way I'm going to start this off is in the past, I've gone from page 1 all the way to the end. Um, what I think I'm going to do is just for the part 1 here is just talk about tips and directions that they give you. Then I'm probably going to do the grid-ins. No, I'm going to do the examples that they have in the beginning before the actual formal test. Is about a dozen or two examples in the beginning of the the handbook, and then I'm going to go into the math, at least for Form A, the grid-ins. Actually, I might do the both grid-ins, and then we'll jump around from there. So why don't we get into this? And as I go along here, I'm going to do this organically. I'm not sure this year if I have enough time to actually get through the whole handbook, given the late date. That said, some of you are testing until December 17th. So there's still 6 weeks theoretically. For those who are taking it for the 14th, let's see how far I can get into this. So basically, I'm going to start with overview stuff, intro stuff, get into the math in some way or form. I don't know which form I'm going to use necessarily, or bounce between the two of them. I might not literally do every single question this year. We'll have to see about that as well. I might just bounce between Form A and Form B, and then I will do the ELA. That's my grand plan here. There's also the SHSAT 9 questions and the extra grid-in questions. So I'll have to try to figure out how to fit them all in here. All right, so with that in mind, let's get to it. So it's important to understand how the test is structured and its layout. So what I'm going to do is, because I'm going to do the ELA after, I'm mainly going to focus on overall structure and only the math part. So you guys should sit down with this handbook and absolutely read it. Read it from front to cover, all the different parts. Um, in a lot of groups, and people just keep asking questions over and over and over and over. And they're the same questions that could be gotten just by spending a half an hour with this. And then you'll get all the answers. And if you, even if you forget them, you can know where to go back to. Um, so you want to be familiar with the description of the test rather, and do both samples when you get an opportunity to do so. They do give the key and the explanation. Um, some of the explanations are not perfect. And by the way, I have an errata. If anybody wants it, you can please email me. My email is at the bottom, GregsTutoringNYC@gmail.com. I may flip it at the end. I actually did a YouTube a couple of days ago on the errata and idiosyncrasies with the exam and how I feel kind of the flavor of the exam is going to occur this year. Basically, there's wildcards every year, and I kind of am getting a sense of where they might be going to with that. And like I said, there are extra grid-in examples after the two samples, and there is a grade 9 section after the two samples as well. Okay, and then they give you the ELA, it's math. There's 57 questions in each section. Okay, 10 of them are field questions. This is no longer documented, which means you get scored on 47 questions. Okay, so there's kind of a wild card in the whole thing about that as well. Be familiar with the directions. So we're going to talk about that a bit right now, which is what we're going to go to. So there's kind of 5 formal parts to the SHSAT. There's 2 high-level ones, which is the math versus the ELA. The math is split into grid-ins, where they don't give you, you have to figure out the answer yourself, and then multiple choice, where you have to do it. So the math is 5 grid-ins, and the multiple choice is uh, they give you 4 choices. It used to be 5. They give you 4 choices that you have to work with. The ELA is split up into revising, editing, and reading comprehension. Okay, revising, editing is in 2 parts. Basically, part A is more grammar-y, where part B is kind of more proofreading kind of stuff, involving transitions and all this other stuff. Again, you guys should sit with this, read the directions to understand it, especially when you get into a lot of you kids, students just jump right into the exam with and just start being robots trying to solve questions. And you kind of need to back off and figure out what the test is about abstractly. Um, and then pacing, focus your time. Pacing is a big thing here as well. And bubble sheeting and things like that as well. By the way, this is an exam where uh, incorrect questions don't count against you. It's only correct questions. So if you're not sure, always bubble in every answer. Okay. Make a plan. Again, there's two sample tests in this thing. The default is 180 minutes, 3 hours. If you have accommodations, you have 360 minutes. Okay, as long as it's approved, you have twice the time. Okay, you can do the questions in any order. You can do the whole test backwards if you want. Even though there's the 5 major sections, you can skip around wherever you want to or how to. That's not necessarily the best strategy, but that's something you're allowed to do. You can go back and forth for the questions and so on. Um, okay. There is a bubble sheet, so managing your bubble sheet is important, and keeping your workspace and so on clean, including your bubble sheet. There should be no stray marks on it. Please read this here and what they tell you about how to do that. Again, you can guess an answer, make it an educated guess if you're going to go down that path. Don't just randomly guess answers. But basically, again, your score is based on the number of correct answers. So if you don't know an answer, make your best choice towards it, and you might be right. Again, there's 4 choices, A, B, C, D, and it alternates between that and E, F, G, H. That's kind of good so that your bubble sheet, if you happen to skip a question that you feel you're going to come back to, this E, F, G, H kind of lets you sink a little bit in that. Anyway, the logic you should be using is try to at least get rid of 2 choices so that you're down to 50-50 so that it can be an educated guess. All right. But hopefully you're proficient enough that you don't need to be doing that. And then if you finish the exam, you can go back to it. You should pace yourself. Again, it's the default is a 3-hour exam. You should probably go 2.5 hours on that. I know a lot of students can get the exam finished in an hour and a half. Um, that's a rare consideration. Figure out using all your time, and on test day, you want to have that buffer. So because I find on a lot of students on test day, they actually take longer than their practice test took. So if you're taking 2.5 hours on test day, you might go right up to that 3 hours. All right. And then you also have to accommodate filling in your bubble sheet, going to the bathroom, uh, different things like that. So definitely accommodate and practice your pacing. That's really important. A lot of you are so focused on the minutia of all the questions that you don't realize there's extra levels to the test. Yes, it's about math. Yes, it's about ELA, but there's whole other things like the psychology of test taking. There's test taking skills, there's pacing, there's numeracy, there's literacy, there's the concepts behind it. So there's a lot of other stuff going behind here. And then figure out a way that you include in your pacing how to check your answers. You should be doing the solution. You should also be doing an alternate solution. Okay. And then once you do that, you should be rereading the question, feeding the question back in, feeding the answer back in basically. And then on top of that, doing a sanity check. You know, if it's asking somebody's age, their answer can't be negative. If it's asking somebody's age, they're not going to be 1,000, right? So use what makes sense, and you can do the sanity check beforehand as well. Make sure you know what the question's asking you. A lot of kids, when it's a multi-step problem, they do 3 of the steps and they don't do the last step. Remember, don't leave a question until you're sure you know what's going on. All right. So that again, and then go through the handbook and read all the tips that they're giving you. All right. So this is about the ELA. So I'm going to skip this because we're going to start on the math. I'm probably going to do that in the next part. I'm going to end this when we get through this and do the next part. And when we finally get to the ELA, we'll come back to this kind of section here. So let me try to skip this. There's a part B again. Read this and figure out what they're telling you to do. These are overall high level / abstract tips, but they're still helpful. The same is going to be true when they show us the math section here in a second. Okay. And what I'm mainly going to focus on at this point is the math directions, what you should kind of be looking for. And then if this doesn't go too wrong, I'm going to do the math example questions. So these are example questions in the ELA they're giving us right now. So a lot of kids skip this, and these are just as important as the other parts, okay? So this is going to be now about tips / directions is really what we're going to focus on here, how to prepare for the math section. Again, like I said, there's 5 grid-ins and 52 multiple choice, okay? It's testing your mathematical skills about terminology, whole bunch of concepts. Concepts is huge on the SHSAT. And you often get asked, what are the topics? That's the topics. Everything you learned to math up until today, all right, and even after today, okay? The purpose of the test is to identify students who benefit from an education at the SHSAT, and items are required to be familiar with math skills that are complex and multi-step problems, all right? And they give some low-down stuff here about stuff like this. So practice is part of it, but it's not the only thing. It's major that this is about concepts. The test is about topic and concepts. It's not just about practicing. Many students are doing 30, 40, 50 practice tests, doing thousands of questions like mindless robots. That's not what this test is about. This is about a cognitive creative process trying to solve novel questions. Okay, so yes, you do need to know your core information, and yes, you do need to practice, but that's not the only thing that you need to do. You need to get a more abstract view. What's the purpose of the exam? When you see a question, so many kids get involved in the minutia that they lose sight of what the question was about. What's the actual concept underneath it? All right, so that's what you guys need to be ending up doing. So get familiar with the test, which is one reason to do the practice. And then they're going to give you some tips here about some of that. So there's some general stuff here. Simplifying fractions, applying statistics. What else do they have here? Notice here that it's saying to go to your library or your teacher and find textbooks and other math resources. So again, this is not just about the minutia of the questions. This is about math as a whole, thinking like a mathematician. What is your analytical skills? That's more important than all the other stuff, right? And that's what makes the SHSAT different than, say, the New York State math test. The New York State math test is mainly testing your rote abilities and your computational skills at a certain level. The SHSAT and your knowledge. The SHSAT is doing those 3 things as well, plus this whole novel approach to things and how to think out of the box and how to do analytics on a question that you've never seen before in your life and still be able to pull it out of a hat logically and coherently and make it fall into place. Okay. So again, it's about math skills, especially with multiple steps and challenging questions. And there's a general tip here. If you're unsure of a question, skip it, code it, and then come back to it, okay? These are all obvious things, but I work with too many students who know this but don't do this. You must ingrain it in your thing. Again, without being a robot, though, that's the key. It should be a part of your mathematical psyche, if you will, okay? Again, you must know some terms. Although the SHSAT normally avoids terminology, but they're giving examples like parallel and perpendicular. right angle. You should know what a right angle is. You should know what complementary and supplementary are. You should know what an acute and obtuse angle are. You should know what an equilateral triangle is, and so on and so on, okay? So again, this is about the rote part of it, but it goes beyond that. But again, formulas, all your formulas you need to know. There will not be a formula sheet provided to you, and you will not be allowed to use a calculator. So this is you're gonna fly by brain power. And again, things like perimeter, areas, 2D shapes, 3D shapes, all this kind of stuff you need to know about, all right? And again, these things will not be given to you on test day. So you need to know them and be fluid in them. This is not about just memorizing stuff. It's about understanding how they all interact and work mathematically. Okay, again, you will not have a calculator on the test. You should bring your own watch, be in control of your own time. The proctor will put some times on the board, but do not depend on the wall clock in your room. It may not even be working. It might go backwards. It might go fast or slow. So you should have your own watch that you're using while you practice so that you're familiar with how to pace yourself and how to use that watch to your advantage when you have 3 hours, when you have 2 hours, when you have 1 hour, when you have 15 minutes. If you're trying to get a certain section done, whatever the case may be, that's part of your repertoire that you want to have in here. All right. Read each question carefully. This it smacks the daylights out of so many of you guys. You end up solving a different question. Don't do that. So read carefully and accurately set stuff up. Write out all your givens. Underline and circle things, just like I'm doing now. Rewrite your givens on the side. Visualize stuff. If you need to draw something, draw it. Try to avoid doing things in your head. If it's 10 times 10, that's fine. But if it's some other computation, again, most of you will end up getting it wrong because you did something in your head or you read too fast. The question is the question, and you need to figure out how to get to the bottom of it. Okay, I'm going to skip this for now because I think I'm going to do this on part 2, and we'll come back to that because we're just focusing on the questions at the moment. Again, draw everything, visualize everything, not just in your brain. Put it on paper. And it can kind of leap out at you better that way. Figures, diagrams, what they give you, write down formulas, anything that's going to help you, especially if you're stuck, right? If you're not sure, just start writing things down. And once you get it down there and you kind of look at it as a blob, what you put down, it might leap out at you what you need to do. All right, again, we're going to skip this. We're going to come back to that. And again, take one step at a time. Take a breather, do this, especially when every new question, it doesn't matter how easy or how hard the previous question was, or the previous 50, or your point of exhaustion. Just reset yourself and go. And remember that most problems are going to have more than one step. And even if it's simple or whatever, try, as I said before, an alternate solution. Most questions have a different way to solve it, and then you can use that as your double check. And it also double checks your math and so on or whatever. That's not the point of this video, but that's just the note that there's some questions that can be solved 4, 5, 6 different ways. So use that. That's to your advantage. Keep that in your pocket, ready to pull out. Okay. And then just take each step one at a time. When you start skipping steps or doing them in your heads, that's where the problems come up. A thing I noticed over the years is that even my brightest students, they will make what's called silly errors. And the truth of the matter is, most silly errors are not silly. There are things you guys are doing because you're breaking the process, because you're being sloppy, and because in some cases you're not even sure of how to do it. So it's easy to say, oh, I made a mistake, and just blow it off. But if there's 57 questions and you do this 15 times, if you do this for 25% of all the questions, that's no longer silly errors. That's, yes, it's tied into your attention to detail and all those other kind of things like that, but once your silly errors get astronomical, 25%, is a lot of questions to make a silly error on. And think about it. If you're getting 35 or 40 right on the exam, don't you want to get another 15? Wouldn't you rather have gotten 50 or 55? And you're throwing away points just on the silliness. And it's about going through it mathematically, logically, coherently, and just taking a breath. Take a breath and go through it. Okay. That's another one. We're going to go back to that later. Now this is about the math multiple choice. So this says solve the problem before looking at the answers. So this is for multiple choice. So this is their strategy. That can work. I do that myself. I also use the answers to guide me along as well. You don't want the answers to be exclusively your guide, because then you're starting to kind of not solve the questions mathematically anymore, and you're probably going to make a mistake, especially if an answer choice might work sometimes with a question, but not all the time with a question. So there's only one answer to these questions that they're giving you here. So you have to be careful with that. Okay. Um, let's see. What else do they tell us here? Uh, if your answer is including market, if not, okay. So this is okay, but it's slightly vacuous, because if you find your answer, it doesn't mean you got it correct. Remember that sometimes the answers are a common mistake, getting back to silly errors and things like that. Usually you might be off by one, a minus sign or a subtraction. Normally there was a lot of students. That's a giant category of the so-called silly errors, where you're doing an order of operation that involves a minus sign, and you guys ignore that. So, or you were supposed to take the reciprocal of a fraction, and you didn't. Or you have an inequality, and you were supposed to flip the sign, and you didn't. So the fact that you got the answer, one of the answer choices in the multiple choice section, does not mean it's right. Okay, so that's, again, if you can use alternate solutions to get the same answer, that's the best. Because one of the problems that happens with double checking is that if you do a problem wrong, most likely, at least this is what I found, that when you go to double check it, you're probably going to do it wrong again. Whatever flew over your head in that initial thing, sometimes you can catch it, but if it flew over your head, you're just going to make that same mistake twice. All right. So that's the nastyism that you have to figure out. Um, of course, if your answer isn't there, you definitely know you did it wrong. And then it says, consider other ways to write your answer. So that may not leap out at you guys. What are they talking about, another way to write your answer? Sometimes they're going to ask you to solve something, and none of the choices match your answer. So either you did it wrong, or sometimes they have a different way of expressing it. For argument's sake, even though the rules tell us that things should be simplified, in other words, if you get 3/6, the answer is supposed to be a half. On the SHSAT, things get simplified. But if it was something symbolic or whatever, they may actually have this as the answer and not the simplified form. This is a bad example because it should be simplified, but in a case where it doesn't involve simplification, they may have an interim step to that. Often, if it's a multi-step problem, if you do the first step, A, and then you do B, and then you do C, and then you do D, there might be a temporary value in step B that is used for step C. And often, if the answer choices is symbolic, like not just 2 but 2x, they may make that the answer and not the final answer that you would have gotten at D. So be careful with that, especially when your answers don't match symbolic answers. And in fact, that's what they're giving here. They're giving here that where it involves x. So be careful. All right. And of course, if you're running out of time, you're not sure, make an educated guess. Don't just make your best guess. We want to avoid that as much as possible, though. We don't want to make best guesses or educated guesses. We want to be proficient enough and fluid enough and have enough numeracy and mathematical mastery that we don't need to get to do that, and do it within the allotted time frame, so that your practice is about getting answers correct, but also trying to do them within the time constraint. So that's a biggie. That's the answers to the questions that were above. Again, I'm going to probably split this off in part 2. Okay, so the grid-ins, please read these. I think this is 3 or 4 pages about how to do the grid-ins. I've worked with enough students where they don't fill in the grid-in properly, right? The first thing is for a minus sign. If it's plus, you leave it space. Now, some of you are working with tutors or prep centers that use a different kind of grid-in sheet. I don't understand the logic of that. Um, you can't do that. And also, what you're trying to do is left justify your numbers, but not left enough that you're using this first column. This is only for the minus sign. If you notice, that whole thing is blackened underneath it. Okay. And then 3.2 is an example like this. You just do that. What's going on here? My tablet is no longer working. What happened to my tablet? Give me a second. I may have to restart the tablet. Ah, my tablet's not working. What happened? Did I change the color? I may have to stop the stream. All right, let me just scroll and see if the tablet catches up for some reason. Let me see what's going on here. No, it knows it's plugged in. Okay, there we go. It came back. All right. So the 3.2, no, it's not liking something. What's going on here? All right, I'm just going to continue, and if I need to end the stream and merge the two of these together or something. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of pages here, and the key here is some of you are not bubbling in the grid-in questions right. So imagine you get all the 5 grid-in questions correct mathematically, but you bubble them in incorrectly. You're going to get them all wrong. So you can't do that. Learn how to bubble this in and have somebody verify with you that you're doing it correctly. You can send me a bubble sheet. Email me at GregsTutoringNYC at gmail.com and go through what they're telling you here. How to justify the answers and things like that, which are good ways, which are bad ways. They're explaining this in a whole bunch of pages. Again, probably because enough kids do lose points, they get the right answer and they do something like this last choice here. The answer should have been 308, and they put 3 space 8, right? They're telling you don't do that. Okay. And in this case, they did 308 in words, but the last thing there, if you notice, they put a 0 into there. I don't know what's going on with this tablet. I can use my trackpad. I'm going to have to reset this after this stream. So that 0 there, if you notice there's nothing above it, they didn't write a 0, but it's going to be taken as 3080. So be careful, be careful, be careful. Get another page describing it. Read these painstakingly. Make sure you sit down and read these. Okay. This is about what to bring on test day. That's awesome. Let me just make sure this is still going on that note. Yes, it is. By the way, I have, let me see here if I can flip the screen for a second. Let me get rid of that. That's there. Is that showing up? Let's see here. I was going to bring up, let me see here. How can I do this? Okay, that's that. No. Okay, there we go. Okay, so if you go here, let's see, where do I have that? Bum, 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 bum. I'm going to bring this to here. It says, wondering what to bring with you to the SHSAT? Check out what to bring, SHSAT.pdf, and SHSAT, what to bring and not. So those two things will complement what's in the SHSAT handbook here. This is from my website, GregsTutoringNYC.com. All right. Okay, let me bring back the handbook. That should be there. Let's get rid of that. And basically, you need pencils, your ticket, and anything that is going to be allowed for your IEP. Bring a watch. Again, it can't have a calculator on it. It cannot have a calculator, and it must be silent. In other words, it can't have an alarm. And if it looks fancy at all, you're probably going to be told to put it away. It can be digital or analog. And yes, almost all watches have an alarm. Make sure you turn it off. If it looks elaborate, they're going to disallow you to use it. And again, you cannot have a calculator, right? You're not allowed to bring a calculator. Your phone has to be put away, a whole bunch of other stuff here. So again, take this here and read it. Read it well. And again, go to those two links I just showed from my site. If you're not sure what the links were, go to GregsTutoringNYC.com and it's on the front page. Okay, they will give you scrap paper, so don't worry about bringing anything. The main thing you need is your ticket and your pencils. And even if you're taking your test at your current middle school, then you probably don't even need your ticket. So we'll have to see how that goes. That said, if you have an IEP, you want your ticket to make sure they're getting into the right accommodations. Um, again, general stuff, arrive on time, your have your ticket. Um, so there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that happens. Often you're told to get there about 7:45 a.m. Okay, so you get there and do that. Um, I still don't know why my tablet's not working. Um, give me 1 second here. That's the beauty of technology when you're streaming. That something goes wrong. Ah, okay. You have to stay for the whole 3 hours. You can't leave during the 3 hours. Um, and then if you have an IEP, there's some discussion down here about how that works. It'll be broken up into 90-minute groups at that point. If you have accommodations, um, you can leave after the 3 hours, but you must sign yourself out so that you're basically waiving the accommodation, the extra time that they gave you. Filling in the answer sheet again, read this. Make sure you know what the heck is going on. There's some stuff here about cheating and other stuff or whatever. Again, read it. Read it. I get asked so many questions. Um, Again, and by the way, after the exam, about once you get the offers, they have about a month period where you can go and actually look at your exam, a copy of it. You can't take any photos. You can't leave with a copy of it. By the way, the same. Getting back to what I was saying earlier, there was scrap paper that they give you. They will collect everything that you use. Okay. Um, So just be careful. And then there's general directions here of the exam itself. Read all this. The proctor will go through these parts with you, where you're filling out the front page or whatever, and putting your name and OSIS number and things like that. Again, that's a sample. And then it starts up here. I'm gonna go to about page, I don't know, I'm guessing 55. I want to go to the math section. No, it's not 55, but at least it skipped us a bit. It's got to be about 88 then, I guess. Let's see. Nope, we're too far in. 77. That might be it. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So there are directions here, right? Again, formulas and definitions are not provided. 2, diagrams are not necessarily drawn to scale. Okay, diagrams are not necessarily drawn to scale. So you guys need to worry about stuff like that. Okay, that basically means that the only thing that is basically an XY grid, and as kind of attendant to that is a number line. Those are the only real two things that are to scale, unless a question tells you, or it gives you information to decide that it is to scale. Theoretically, that means they can give you an angle like this. Whoops. And that might be less than 90, even though it looks like it's greater than 90. So be careful with these kind of things. But then it says graphs are drawn to scale. So that's what I'm talking about right now. That will be to scale. And then I mentioned this earlier. All fractions should be simplified to lowest terms. Okay, so be careful with stuff like that. Again, more grid and details. Be super duper careful. And then when you start the exam, there's some more stuff here, right? So read that. Again, I'm telling you guys to read it and you don't want to read this on test day. Why waste 5 or 10 minutes reading instructions? It's going to be the same instructions that they're giving here. So do it now before that. Anyway, you have your 5 grid-ins here, and then before the multiple choice, there'll be a slight mention of things here as well. I think I skipped the line here that I wanted to talk about. Give me 1 second and go back to that. Yeah, there was. If you notice, it says number 4, graphs are drawn to scale. Unless stated otherwise, you can assume relationships according to appearance. For example, lines on the graph that appear to be parallel can be assumed to be parallel. But again, this is on a graph. Okay. This is also true for concurrent lines, straight lines, collinear points, and right angles. Again, if you guys don't know what any of those things are, go look them up. Stuff like collinear point or concurrent lines, right? Be careful that you know what those terminology are. All right. Okay, so that's all the instructions. The part 2 is going to include the example math that they gave earlier, and then we're probably going to jump into a grid and example, depending how my day goes. I'm probably going to pound out a few of these and just see where this ends up being at. Again, I'm Greg from Greg's Tutoring NYC. My email's at the bottom, GregsTutoringNYC.com. And hey, like and subscribe, share, set your notifications. I'm going to be doing a bunch of these until exam day and probably afterward. As usual,